Honeyshuckleex.
I'm Zachbot Barbecue.
And I'm Giggleklutz.
And today, we're going to be talking about something. I'm sure you've read what it is, but if you have somehow clicked on this and not read anything about it, like if autoplay brought you here, I want you to play in this space, okay? I want you to tell me what these video games have in common, okay? You might not know all of them, and that's okay. We've got Yonder Cloudcatcher Chronicles, A Short Hike, Stardew Valley, Cozy Grove, Moon RPG, Papatura, Starbound, The Sims 3, Pokemon, almost any Pokemon, Terraria, Core Keeper, Graveyard Keeper, Don't Starve Together, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Super Mario Odyssey, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and Twilight Princess, Hades, Animal Crossing, any Animal Crossing, Minecraft, Ooblets, Before the Green Moon, Welcome to Elk, and Cult of the Lamb.
What do these games all have in common?
Could it possibly be?
Swords?
No.
No?
No. Yonder definitely does not have swords, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
But it's fishing.
It's fishing.
It's fishing.
It's fishing!
The inexplicably cliche throw-in minigame for video games. Why? Why fishing? Why so many fishing? And sometimes, for me, sometimes it is the most frustrating part of the game. I know other people love it. They really do. But like in Yonder, I was never even interested in joining the fishing derby. It was like, nope. I put up with the fishing as little as possible.
And like some games, it's like really simple. You press one button, you press another button, you've caught a fish.
Yep.
It can be as basic as that.
It's that way in Cozy Grove.
It's more or less that way in Pokemon, just with a battle added in.
Right after you catch the fish.
Right after you catch the fish.
You catch the fish, you can beat it up!
Now we fight! On my turf!
Yeah, it's kind of cheating when you think
Yes,
about
it
it.
is. It's like, I'm going to rip you out of the water and then you have to fight me. Say, what, man? This is just not cool.
I mean, most of the fish in Pokemon just kind of float in midair anyway, so...
Okay. That's a little bit more fair.
Yeah, but it's a surprising amount of video games that have fishing in them, and this isn't counting fishing games,
Right.
like where the whole premise is you go fishing, because, I mean, I sure hope your fishing game has fishing in it.
I'm sure there are some that don't for some reason, and then there's all the weird ones where fishing is combined with something else. The most recent one I heard of that's just, I don't want to play because I don't really like fishing games, and I don't like skating games, but somebody combined a skateboarding game with fishing called Skatefish, and you fish from a skateboard.
I don't know what is with the trend lately of just slapping skateboarding into other games, but you know what? It's fine.
Maybe skateboarding is the new fishing.
Maybe.
Maybe. And they're just ahead of their time. Who knows?
Is it avant-garde to combine them together?
Well, we may have to examine this at a later date. Meanwhile, if you've ever played Skatefish, just let us know what that's like. And whether or not it's just a novelty factor or whether or not it's actually fun. I'm curious. I'm probably still not going to play it, but I love hearing about people's experiences with games. But anyway, back to fishing.
Yeah, because, like, here's another interesting thing. Like, I have Ooblets on this list, right? But in Ooblets, you don't fish for fish. But you still fish. And I'm like, it's so weird.
And I'm wondering what the draw is, because it just seems like a weird thing to toss in, really, because how much do people fish in their everyday lives? It's like, what is this fascination with fishing?
I mean, when you think about it, how often do you jump?
Me?
Yeah.
If it's part of dancing, then all the time.
Okay, but like...
Because I do a significant amount of dancing.
When you're going about your day-to-day life, how often do you jump?
Probably more than the average person. I am weird like that.
I don't think I've jumped today.
Exactly!
Yeah.
Like, standardly, it's not too common, even if you are an outlier.
That's
or
true.
a plumber.
Video games have skewed your thinking of plumbing, kid.
Yeah, I know. It wouldn't be fun to joke about it if it wasn't.
Fine.
But just, there's some things that video games, like, overly represent, and fishing seems to be one of those things.
Second to murdering everyone.
Well, yeah, that... yeah. It's like... the reason I've played Yonder Cloudcatcher Chronicles is because I was getting fed up with all the games having combat, and that game doesn't have any combat, so it's a nice change of pace. It's a cute little game. We may talk about it at some other time. And it's actually not that little, but...
Well, hey, it's got fishing in it, so, it's
got-
going places.
It's got fishing!
Yeah.
Like,
and there's hidden cats. So, if you're intrigued, go look it up.
Like, okay, back on track, okay? Like, I didn't put some things on this list. Like, games that I know that have fishing that we have not played are not on this list.
Right, we've played all of these games, at least one of us.
Yeah. Which means, like, there are even more, except, actually, wait, I haven't played Cult of the Lamb. I have Cult of the Lamb, I haven't played it. Whoops. Still need to do that. But the more you look, the more you see fishing everywhere. And I'm still reeling.
We started this list a while back and just added to it and added to it and added to it. And then I started playing the new update of Stardew Valley. And I'm like, you know what? I think it's actually time to do the fishing episode. And one of the things I was thinking that people probably get out of the fishing is, depending on what mechanic you use, sometimes there's a skill thing. Stardew Valley's is kind of a skill thing. And so is Yonder Cloudcatchers is kind of a skill thing. It doesn't have levels or anything, but you do have to kind of learn how it works and get better at it. But I think it's kind of somewhat the gambling, trying to figure out what's going to show up when, bettering your odds by being in the right place at the right time. But you don't know what you're going to get or how big it's going to be until you pull it out of the water. That's what I mean by the gambling kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I know you had some interesting thoughts on this, Sackbot.
Yeah, I probably did.
Okay, well then I'll say what I remember you saying, which is that, like, the slow-paced games, it's action, and fast-paced games, it's a break.
Yeah.
And
so it can be used for a pace modifier.
A pace modifier, no matter what kind of game you're playing. It's weird that way.
Right. I mean, you did talk to a developer.
I talked to a developer who talked to a developer. It's a chain of events. But basically, we heard a reply from a AAA developer who I'm not going to name because I didn't exactly get permission to cite this opinion. But basically, they said that it's more relaxing than shooting aliens.
So you put it in as a pace modifier for a fast pace as a slowdown.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And also, quote, it's fun.
Yeah.
It can be.
It certainly has the potential. I'm sure we all have some examples of when fishing wasn't exactly fun.
Do you want to talk about yours first?
It's kind of an escalating scale.
Please do. Let's talk about our video game fishing experiences.
Oh yeah, I'm just thinking of one particular fish. It's not even a fish, it's an anchor. But goddamn this anchor. It's a Pokemon thing. Pokemon Sun and Moon have, like, set fishing spots just about everywhere, and in one fishing spot inside someone's house, there's a 1% chance to fish up this fucking anchor. I looked everywhere for it. This is infuriating. There's, like, 4 fishing spots in this town. It only lists it as being in this town. Why?
Okay.
Dummies! Why? So there's a fishing frustration.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes a little too far.
Yeah. So what about you, Sackbot? I guess we're telling frustrating fishing stories. You got one of those?
Trying to recall if there's any specific instances I can think of that aren't jumping directly into the deep end, but...
Jumping into the deep end, I see what you did there.
Yeah, that one was also an accident. But what I'm about to tell you is not an accident. It is very much not an accident. Okay, I don't know, maybe it is. That would actually be a pretty good explanation for why the mechanics are so horrendous. So, have you ever heard of Moon? Well, you probably have, because it's in the sky and you kind of can't get away from it, but...
Especially if you're playing Majora's Mask, you really can't get away from it.
We're not, though. We're playing Moon RPG.
We're playing Moon RPG.
Yeah, the one we brought up earlier that has a really confusing name.
So what about Moon RPG?
So, it has fishing in it, which is why we were bringing it up in this episode. More specifically because, the fishing is, some of the most interesting fishing mechanics I've seen in a video game. But I mean interesting in, like...
Derogatory.
It's like the interesting that you say to people when you don't want to offend them.
Oh, that's so interesting.
No, don't add so if you don't really like it, because that gives people the wrong idea. It's like, oh, interesting.
That's... You follow that train of thought, and that's how you end up with a pair of ostentatious red cowboy boots you don't want.
Okay, Cheaty.
Okay, so basically, in Moon RPG Remix, whatever the heck, the fishing is... Basically, nothing about this is on your side.
Aside from, like, casting? Is that on your side?
I remember that being hard, too. Even though I was not driving, so just my impression was it was really hard to trigger it properly, to know if it was working, to know where you could do it.
So, yeah, it's just kind of the usual thing where, the controls are jank. You have to figure out the whole money thing so you can buy bait and then actually find out where the heck you use it. So you have to deal with the inventory management as well. So you actually get to the spot where the fishing happens, then actually understand the tutorial when it is told to you, because I remember having trouble with that.
Because you're trying to actively catch a fish while the tutorial's happening and you can fail catching the fish?
Yeah, something like that. The memory's kind of fuzzy. I was too busy being angry about one bit to remember the rest of the fishing. So anyway, it's like there's this thing where the bobber starts going and you need to time it just right to get the fish on the line. But when that happens, you ever been playing Guitar Hero and just felt like, man, I wish I didn't have any idea what the notes were? It's like, just scrap the whole user interface, no music. Just the bar that's telling me if I'm getting it right or not.
So they made the fishing a rhythm game.
Yeah, it's like, it's this bar that's kind of, like, constantly ticking down, starts near the end of it where you fail, and you need to press the button continuously to reel in the fish, which I think characterizes the physical act of fishing in a very interesting fashion, and in one that's not necessarily derogatory when I say interesting, but...
And also, like, it's kind of weird that, like, if the bar empties toward you... That's bad. You want the bar to fill up away from you, which looks really counterintuitive because that kind of implies the fish is getting away.
I don't know, I think you kind of have like two fishing spots and it's kind of like on the opposite side of the screen each time, so it makes sense in one and not the other. That's not the point. The point is, you're dealing with this invisible rhythm, which, if you don't nail it right away, you'll lose and have to do the rest of the annoying fishing stuff to get it to work again. And then it's like, something that I did not notice that Honeyshuckle has observed is that the rhythm may change in the process. It's like, that didn't feel like it to me, but I don't know.
This is me reading guides because we didn't understand how it worked at first, and like, they said like it was dynamic, and the further along you were, it would change the rhythm a little bit, so you had to slow down as you kept going.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was just missing half the beats or something. Like I said, none of this is on your side.
Right, it's not intuitive at all.
So yeah, it's like the thing with this game is that it has a lot of puzzles. So it's like, with the fishing is just to solve some of the game's puzzles, it's fine, but you need to complete multiple mandatory objectives by catching very specific things.
Yeah, and not are any of them fish?
Well, okay, you have to catch frog for caviar.
Okay, and you have to catch a refrigerator.
Yeah, you have to catch a bunch of bullshits.
I don't think literally, though. I don't think we ever... You never know with that game. That game is weird. We're gonna do a whole thing about that game later, but...
We're gonna talk about it, yeah.
So anyway, it's like if you literally caught bullshit during that would have been a funny payoff.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
And it would have been, on theme. I mean, there's a lot of jokes in it.
The game is a shitpost.
Yes!
That's why we're going to talk about it later, probably,
Mm-hmm. But anyway, we're talking about fishing now.
So that's like the worst kind of fishing you've ever played in video gaming? Is that what you'd say?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the worst. It's like, I don't know. I get frustrated by fishing mechanics more frequently than I enjoy them, which is really weird to me because I actually like to fish in the physical realm. So I haven't done it in a really long time, but we'll get to that a little later. But what's funny is some of my favorite fishing in video games wasn't even officially fishing mechanics. I mean, I've been told, here, I'll start to go back to Skyrim. I always play an Argonian, right? And I love swimming and breathing underwater and going and catching the fish that way with my hands, not really with a fishing mechanic. I always find that a lot of fun. And that seems more realistic than a lot of other fishing to me. And then the other is bomb fishing in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, because that's... Yeah, that's definitely a game that includes fish but doesn't include fishing, which means you have to get creative.
Yeah, it's like how they distinctly did not change that in the sequel and just, like, gave you setups to, like, electrocute the fish instead of catching them.
Yeah, that's pretty much how that works.
I was so shocked that that worked when the first time I did it, and I also was shocked that I thought of it first. I mean, not first among players in general, but first among my household.
Yeah, because I just kept dashing after fish until I could grab them.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, boom!
Yeah, you see, it's like our experience with fishing mechanics is like, oh, you have to... The fish don't even show up unless you put the stuff in the water to catch them specifically. Meanwhile, you're going over there just grabbing fish right out of the water. So you have no pretenses of engaging in any formal fish combat.
Wait. Can you throw stuff in the water to attract fish in Breath of the Wild? Is that what I'm getting from this?
No, it's just more of expect something that actually involves catching them.
Okay.
Because it's the closest thing is, diving in the water to catch them. But then it's like if you already have that as a baseline, you might be willing to try something more over the top.
It's just something that, like, if it was a thing, I'd be like, oh, of course that's a thing. Of course I do the most backward thing for the longest time until other people show me, I could be making it easier on myself.
Yeah, it's like, as I say that, it's like, I don't know if that's a mechanic, but it feels like a mechanic that would be in the game. But I've never heard anybody mention it, so some NPC probably would have mentioned that to me at some point. It would be like a tip that pops up on the screen or something, if you're supposed to catch fish that way, so I don't know, explosives might just be the answer.
Explosives just might be the answer. Okay, that's our quote of the day. Good job.
Sackbot gets our quote of the day. So, do either of you have positive fishing mechanics that you really enjoyed, or positive in-game fishing stories?
Well, I mean, it's like I've been binging Terraria again recently, and it's like, well, I will note, the next update, they are actually slating to change the mechanics. I don't know how yet, but...
Ooh.
Posted some stuff about that, I just didn't watch it. But yeah, as far as fishing in that game goes, it's like, I wouldn't necessarily say the fishing experience itself is too positive. It's definitely a, just kind of taking the edge off sort of mechanic, where you just kind of sit next to a pool of liquid for a while. But it's just neat. Kind of ends up being a means to pull resources out of nowhere, so it could make usually limited stuff renewable.
Yeah, I also like how in Terraria there's a lot of not real fish. So, like, cloudfish for, like, quest stuff. You can find, like, rockfish that you could use as a weapon.
It's like there's, the double cod, which is both, a Call of Duty joke because it makes an ammo potion, but also it just has two faces.
It's so goofy.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad that fishing ends up goofy in video games, because the whole concept to me is, kind of goofy.
It's like putting fishing in video games, barring one example I have, pretty much just never really captures the spirit of fishing. So, the idea that, I don't know, maybe you catch like a frickin' painting sometimes or something, it's like, it's fine.
Yeah, why not? And, like, speaking of, like, fishing in video games not capturing, like, what fishing is in real life, like, I'm gonna pull from an example of the fishing game. Like, this is not, like, a fishing minigame. This is Radical Fishing.
Oh.
And...
It's a phone game that you played.
Yeah, it's a phone game that I played back when it was a Flash game. So, like, nowadays it's Ridiculous Fishing, but, like, when Flash Player shut down, they made a new version of the game for phones. And so... You know how when you fish normally, you try to catch a fish and you reel it in? This one you try to dodge all the fish so that way your hook goes as far down as you can, and then when you finally snag something, the line starts to retract and you try to catch as many fish as possible on the hook, so that way when it reels in, you use the momentum to fling them into the air so you can shoot them with your gun. It's so So dumb. I love it.
This is ridiculous fishing?
Yeah.
Okay. Just in case the audience wants to know more about that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, I heard of lasso fishing, but this is ridiculous.
This is ridiculous. Yeah. Oh, and like talking about fishing in games, just kind of like reawakening this love I had for that Flash game is just, I'm glad I remembered that this thing exists.
Yeah, it's not a fever dream. You really did play that.
It
really does
did.
exist. Somebody made it.
It really does.
So any other positive video game fishing experiences?
Well, it's probably one I'm forgetting, because there's a lot of them.
Fishing versus you and Kirby in the Forgotten Land was kind of fun.
Oh yeah, I was forgetting about that one.
Yeah, like, in that one, like, as you, like, cast for the fish, but then, like, when you reel it in, you have to do, like, a button combo, so, like, press Y, press B, press A, and then you reel in the fish.
I would hate that.
Yeah, it's like, quick time events can be pretty divisive, just the usual thing where it just prompts you to put a bunch of specific inputs in a row. Yeah, it typically works better, though, when it's like, the gameplay is specifically dedicated to those.
Yeah,
You can't just throw those things in.
As a minigame, it works. And, like, if you succeed enough times in a row, you get to catch, like, the legendary fish thing. And, like, we were kind of racing to see which one of us could catch it first. So we were both reeling at the same time.
So yeah, it's just this neat thing where you do a quick spree of inputs to catch the fish, and then if you keep catching them in a row, you get bigger and bigger fish.
That's, like, the minigame that we played that we actually competed against each other. I think when we did the cooking one, we kind of just cooperated, and it was like, you won! It's like, what do you mean? We did it! We survived the work day! That's aside the point, but, like, I think that one was kind of slightly different from other fishing minigames.
Yeah, it wasn't a neat take on just putting fishing in a Kirby game.
Which, gosh, I bet that, some of these games don't seem like they were built to accommodate the fishing. You know what I mean? So it's like, fishing was like an add-on later.
Yeah, and then, like, you have games like Core Keeper, where fishing is an entire tech tree, and since you have to cook food anyway, you might as well have fish be one of those resources. That said, getting your fishing experience to level 100 is absurd. Why would you do this?
I don't know much about Core Keeper.
Ah, so the fishing rants resurface.
Jeez. So, how does fishing in video games compare to fishing in life?
Well, it's like, to get into one last video game fishing examples, I'm gonna, bring up quick the Sims 3. It's like, that has fishing in it, and yeah, well, it does have some ridiculous fish you can catch. The actual experience, because you're kind of living a cast of characters' life vicariously in that game. It's just doing life simulation. How that can boil down to is, like, you just end up with a bunch of people sitting around a body of water just chatting, and fish happens sometimes.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That, like, it's a lot slower paced than video games would lead you to believe.
There are lots of reasons to not practice the archaic act of fishing, in the modern world.
Like, if you actually want to eat food for dinner.
Right, I mean, I've never fished because we needed to eat. But I was born in Minnesota. So, I have fished before. I was on a boat before I was even 6 weeks old. And as we were getting ready for this episode, and this is a little bit of a tangent from fishing itself, but just the weirdness that is fish in video games really kind of sidesteps one of the big lessons of fishing in life, is that when you fish, you're actually catching a creature in its natural habitat, bringing it out of its whole world, and then killing it. That was my first experiences with real life and death, was fishing, and then watching the family men clean them after we came back, and playing in the gut bucket as a small child, and, getting to see that this is how it goes. This is what eating meat actually is. And
Was it tasty?
You've had your grandpa's fried fish. You
Yes,
know
it's
exactly
tasty.
how tasty it is.
Yeah, it's like that was the real thing. The capped off a good fishing outing was just going out there, just spending some quality time together, and then coming back and having like some like fresh caught fish and chips.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then there's video games. There's the weirdness of you take fish and you put them in your chest like any other inventory, and then in a lot of cases they stay alive and fresh in there. Which is not what fish do.
Yeah, like there are always exceptions, like in Breath of the Wild, if you pick them up, they're dead now. Don't Starve, where they flop and then die.
Yeah, but then there's Cozy Grove, where if it doesn't fit in your inventory, it'll just flop on the shore for 2 weeks, or until you pick it up.
That seems like such a cruel, cruel fate.
I think they flop around if you set them down, even after they've been in the chest for a very long time, too, so...
Infinite misery!
Kinda, yeah. And then what you're supposed to do with them is you burn them and use fish bones to build things. Cozy Grove's a weird game, guys. It is. I'm not going to get into the weirdness that is Cozy Grove right now, though. Anyway, just the whole idea that the fish are living creatures and then all of a sudden they're objects that, have Schrodinger's life. They are sometimes alive and sometimes they're not. And it's just dissociation with that whole life or death, especially in games that also have combat where you're like killing things all the time. Why don't the fish necessarily die? Is kind of weird to me too. But fishing in video games really does distort what most of my experience with fishing actually is. And it's social. It's to build relationship. You go fishing to spend time with people. Mostly not talking, or talking very softly. But it's meditative, it's contemplative, it's, I'm sure deep sea fishing is very different, but the lake fishing that I'm used to is a very gentle kind of thing, but with, real consequences. A lot of that gets lost in the minigame mechanics,
Yeah, it's not like you go out to the beach in Stardew Valley, sit there all day and come back with a sunburn.
It's hard to do anything all day in Stardew Valley. There's always too much to do. Oh my god. But it's got me to stop playing Cookie Clicker, so what can I say?
Character development!
Is that character development? I'm not positive. But anyway, so what do you guys get out of fishing? Do you have a good fishing story from life, or a good contrast between video game fishing and...
I do think, because Terraria is multiplayer, I do think you can actually have some of that camaraderie in, fishing together sometimes. It can be a little bit jarring because everybody has, their bobbers in similar places, and you can get confused as to who's actually reeling in a fish. So that can get kind of funny, especially when someone puts their bobber directly on top of your bobber just for giggles to see what would happen.
Was it you doing that?
Sackbot, was there anything you wanted to talk about?
As suspected, yeah. Mm-hmm. Just for giggles, huh? You'd think you'd be the one with giggles in your handle. But we kid. We have fun.
We do have fun.
There was one time we went out fishing with you and me, Shuckle. Went out fishing with Grandpa. It's the same as the fish and chip story. It was you just got to spend a few hours out there, just chatting, catching some fish. It's brought some little cookies along, and it was this a funny coincidence thing where after we'd eat some of the cookies, we'd catch a fish. So it was like they were magic.
Was this the same trip where, I was reeling in the line because we were about to go back, and a fish decided, that was the perfect time to try to bite it, and then, I just kind of yanked it out of the water?
It's I think, as far as, I can only remember 2 times we went fishing out there. It was, the second time we didn't catch anything, so it was probably that...
Yeah.
It's remember, if you or your loved one is a fish, FOMO is dangerous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And also, Also, in real life, if you go fishing, there's a good chance you will not catch anything.
Yeah, it can take some skill, and sometimes it can take some specialized equipment that you may not have, and there's seasons to it.
And also, I've never caught a boot.
Yeah, you don't want there to be that much garbage in
Water that you're fishing in.
Yeah.
Or just, water in general.
I mean, there might be some, but yeah, video game water is tons more junky because it's fun to play that gambling thing. Are you going to end up with a prize fish, or are you going to end up with an old, worn-out CD?
Well, the CD is one of the better things that I've gotten in Stardew Valley from fishing.
Sure.
That's nice in the recycling machine.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with driftwood, huh? What am I going to do with driftwood?
Get torches or coal.
Who uses torches in Stardew Valley?
Nobody, but you can also give it to Leah or Lee as a gift.
True. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, fish.
There's a lot to talk about with fish, and we could talk even more about fishing in video games, but why don't you guys tell us your fishing stories?
Yes, please.
In real life, in video games, in some weird hybrid model between the two. Do you fish and fish at the same time?
I mean, I was in an improv bit about a fishing trip once. Ended up catching a big two-headed fish, which was not actually my idea because it's just somebody else provided that, and I thought that was neat.
There you go.
Improv.
It's improv is just one of those things where you can just have two people just shout college football at the same time. No one is expecting it, and it's the greatest thing ever.
I'll take your word for it.
College football!
You see, I was expecting it.
It wasn't the greatest thing ever, I'm gonna say.
Why didn't you guys shout with me?
Okay, so you see, this is the wonderful thing about fishing is you end up talking about so many strange things that don't actually have anything to do with fish.
This is the great thing about improv. You don't know how to react to the things you've just said.
So anyway, if you have fishing stories, if they're real life video games, if you have an improv sketch about fishing, I'd love to hear about that, I guess.
Anyway, thank you for joining us.
This has been Collab Not Multiplayer and a bunch of fish, apparently.
I'm Honeyshuckleex.
I'm Zagbog Barbecue.
And I'm Giggleclutz. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Catch you later.
Oh, goodness.
It's I tell you, a lot of people are going to be really hooked on the podcast because of this episode. Okay, bye for real now.